Elaine, it's great to have you with me today. We met through another podcaster, Jacqueline, and I'm glad that she was able to give me your contact information. We had a brief discussion, you and I, and this is what led us to having you come on today. Please just start off with telling us who you are, what you're currently doing, what you're passionate about, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay, thank you so much, Don. I really appreciate being here, and yet little hat tip to Jacqueline for introducing us.
Yeah.
She's absolutely awesome. It's a really nice I would say community podcasting because there are definite advantages to be able to share your guests with each other and even have yourself be a guest on somebody's podcast. So that I'm very thankful for. My name's Elaine Lindsay. I have a whole bunch of different hats that I wear. I have a number of different handles too. So we'll start with the I guess the bread and butter. I am a digital integration specialist, and what that means is I take everything from your mindset, your website, your social media, and your SEO, and make sure that everything you have is congruent so that you can get found first in search. That's it in a nutshell. It's a sort of passion because, and we'll probably talk about this, but for a long, long time, like decades, plural, I couldn't do anything. I was basically in bed or in hospital. And I took to a computer like a duck to water, and it meant that I had connection and that I could keep my brain going and I could learn and I could do things. So for me, ferreting out the ways to get people found and finding better ways to work online, that's a definite passion. It's not the top of the list. The top of the list is actually my podcast. The podcast is known as Suicide Zen Forgiveness, and I share the stories of suicide loss, ideation, and mental health. And my mission is to end the silence, the stigma, and the shame about suicide loss and ideation, and by extension, mental health. And I make a really great podcast host because I guess I fit all those categories. That's me. My biggest handle, I guess my latest handle is the Bionic Glamma. That's GLAMMA. I have 5 gorgeous grandkids. I have 2 kids, one husband at the moment, my current husband. That's what I always say. It's been 43 years, so I think he'll pretty well stick. We work together somewhat in the day job with True Social, and the passion project is starting to be the biggest thing in my life. And that's, for me, that's a double-edged sword. It's wonderful that I get to follow my passion. It is great that I have a mission that will allow for hope for some people, but it's horrible that there is such a need for what I do because we lose people all the time.
Yeah, so we do lose a lot of people, and I'm guessing you're referring to the suicide part of your podcast, if I'm right.
I am the suicide and by extension mental health,
Hmm.
because my firm belief, I have had suicidal ideation since I was a kid. Uh, didn't know until I started doing this podcast that it's actually a thing. It was, some people, you hurt yourself. Some people go into histrionics. They cry, they scream, they whatever. You drop a cup, your car breaks down. People get upset. One of my options was always, well, I'll just end it. which seems incredibly bizarre. And a lot of people would say, well, I mean, okay, frankly, I'm 68 years old. Why now? Like, how did you not go see someone? Why did you not go to therapy? Why is this something you didn't understand until 2 years ago? And the answer to that is I worked in a facility for, well, ostensibly mental health, but it was a giant sprawling facility about an hour away from where I live. And it was where they put everyone in society that people didn't know what to do with. That's probably not how they word it, but that's what I saw. I started volunteering there when I was 12. And by the time I was 15, the provincial government here in Canada gave me a special dispensation because back that early, you weren't allowed to work until you were 16. But they allowed me to work and live on campus for the summer with some older teenagers. And I did that on the campus for 2 years. And in that time, I saw someone that I went to school with brought to the facility because he was a runaway. He had a stepfather that beat his mom and him and his siblings. And he ran away so many times, they put him in a home for wayward boys. And that's where he was when I met him going to school in grade 9. And I guess he ran away one too many times because they then incarcerated him for all intents and purposes in Smith Falls, Rideau Regional Hospital School. And what I saw as a 15-year-old was that after 4 months, Michel wasn't the same guy that I went to school with. He had devolved somewhat to go along with the group he was in. And I did a lot of research over the years and found that as humans, we do tend to go to the lowest common denominator. That's why you have kids joining gangs. That's why you have, kids doing things that normally they would not, but when they get in that pack mentality, they tend to go to that, I said, lowest common denominator to fit in. And that's, I guess, what had happened. And by the second year that he was there, he was not the same person at all, which made me very worried about saying anything about what went through my head. Because in the 60s and the early 70s, you could still be locked up. You could get electroshock therapy. There were so many things that they could just do to people if you let them know kind of what was going on in your head. And it sounds almost, bizarre. But I remember being a teenager and there was a song on the radio, a pop song, called "They're Coming to Take You Away, Ha Ha, Hee Hee, Ho Ho, to the Funny Farm." There's more to the song, but that was the sort of climate that I grew up in. And if there was something wrong, or if there was something wrong in your family, God forbid someone took their life, you didn't dare tell anybody that. It was people thought it was a stain on the family. That became a big issue for me because at 16, I lost a very dear friend. And that was sort of the beginning of the end for me at that point. I took a nosedive into God knows where, because I now know I didn't want to feel like that. I didn't want to be in that kind of grief. I didn't want to be that confused. And the underlying piece was I had wanted to take my life over and over and over again. And so I just felt so damaged. I knew that I couldn't go to that place to examine Andrea leaving because it would mean the end of me.
So it was the loss of your friend first that led you to start thinking suicidal thoughts?
No, they were actually, that's a really good question, because no, they were kind of there before that.
Okay.
But as children, we're not told that all the thoughts in our head aren't A, real, B, they don't have to be acted on,
Mm-hmm.
and C, they shouldn't be kept to ourselves. We
Mm-hmm.
need to talk to somebody.
Right.
So that's kind of where my mission comes from, because I don't want children now to have to live with all that darkness in their head. Because that's ultimately what, for me, made everything about living at that point it was such a push-pull situation. I was constantly, weighing the options. Do I get out of bed this morning, or do I die? Do I have a shower before I go to school, or do I just end it? And that combined with the unexplained or experienced grief just made life unbearable. And I turned to any kind of substance that would allow me to distance myself from me.
And this was all prior to social media and stuff, because I mean, you're going way back in the
Oh my
past, but
God,
yeah,
yes.
but I'm bringing that up because I feel like there's more stress on kids now, more than
Yes.
ever, because
Yes.
they're watching everything thinking they have to be at this certain level when they don't have to be. And so they put themselves down, and then they probably have the suicidal thoughts, just like you're sharing.
Well, and because you'll notice on social media, up until about 5 years ago,
Mhm.
nobody said, "Oh, I'm having a bad day. You know, I'm thinking of perhaps taking my life. I don't feel great. My life isn't good. I don't have all the damn fashion that's ever come out. Oh, I can't buy, what's her name, Kardashian's lipstick, even though I'm 13 and should have all that money." Like, all of these things are so one-sided and blown out of proportion in social media. Oh, God help us. I'm really glad we didn't have it back then, because on top of everything else, there was, as a girl, an awful lot of us had, self-esteem issues and body issues. And I mean, put all of that in the mix. Kids today, my God, they just have this ton weight on them to try and look like the people that they see in social media. And the fact is, I don't care how much money people have. I'm here to tell you that if you scratch the surface, no one's life is perfect. Nobody. I don't care who they are. Okay, there is always something. And a really good friend who happened to be, as my young son said back then, filthy, stinking rich. We had a really good discussion one night, and she said to me, it may look like money solves problems. It only solves some of the problems and not the important ones. I thought that was a really, really important lesson to learn. And it's true, because it doesn't matter what's in your bank account. If what's in your head is causing you trouble, all the money in the world isn't going to change that. And all this social media just makes it look like, all these people are having fabulous lives and they're traveling all over, and even their animals are so perfect. Never mind their kids. It's such a skewed vision of what life is. And in a way, it's odd, but TikTok, when they started TikTok for good, it became a more honest platform for kids to be able to say, I'm not doing well. I'm struggling. Kids are bullying me. All of those things. There are now platforms for that. But that first, I would say, decade of social media was just an absolute impressionist painting of perfection that had absolutely nothing to do with what any of us were really living.
Yeah, and I think it's all about relationships. And if
Yeah.
I feel like they categorized your friend that you from the past, that he should be around these people, and that's him. That's who he is. And
Yeah.
that's not always the case. That probably was not who he was, right?
No.
But he accepted that then. You know what I mean? He put himself in that hole, and it would have taken you and probably a few other people to keep on at him to get him out of that, right? And that sounds like that's what probably got you out of your suicidal thoughts eventually, over time that you've been around certain people.
Stop right there.
All right.
Okay. Because this is what people don't understand about ideation. It doesn't go away.
Okay.
You learn to work around it. You learn to be grateful for all the things in your life and make plans to deal with those bad days.
Mhm.
Because shit still happens, okay? Sometimes you get a flat tire, or the car breaks down, or the kids don't act right, or the dog pees on the floor for no reason. Like, these things don't seem like the end of the world, but for somebody with ideation, they can. And I believe firmly, after being in this space for so long, that for the most part, people who consider suicide, they don't want to die. They just want the pain to end. That could be emotional pain, it could be spiritual, it could be physical. But it's just about ending that pain. And for me, my message is, you know what, that's a way permanent solution for what could be a temporary problem.
Mhm.
Because pain, as you know, there's a lot more to my story, and pain becomes a very big part of my story. Pain is manageable. Not all the time, but you can learn to manage. There are things you can do to make it better. And I'm not talking about drugs, I'm talking about meditation and visualization. And even, vitamins and supplements can be helpful. But living with pain of any sort, you have to talk to someone. You can't be an island. You can't do it all yourself. And I always say I'm a super slow learner, because I was in my 50s before I even told anybody anything about my story.
Mhm.
I never said a word to anybody about any of it. I had like a quick 2-second thing about my whole life. And it just was, no, nobody wants to hear about this crap. And I better keep it under wraps or they're going to block me up.
So did you think at a point that you didn't matter like to other people? That's why you didn't
Oh,
share the story?
always,
Yeah.
always. And I always thought I didn't matter. Like, what I had to say wasn't important. And funny thing, I don't know where it came from or why, but I got to a point where, when they tell you to make a list of all the things that are important to you, all the people, what have you,
Yeah.
I never made it to my list. It never occurred to me
You
to
never
put
wrote your
me on.
name.
No,
Okay.
never
All right.
occurred to me to put me
Yeah.
on the list. The hell would I be doing on the list?
Right.
Like, it was that anathema to me that, well, why the hell would I put me on my list?
Mhm.
And I mean, that's all part of what had happened. Andrea was the first in what we'll call a series of unfortunate events in my life, when 4 years after Andrea died. I was 20 years old. I had I had a little girl in 1973, and she was good. In 1975, I had a second. My husband and I things were good. Everything was fine. We're not quite sure what happened. I went to do the laundry one night and slipped down the stairs and lost her at 7 months. So Shannon was born and died the same day. It's a little hard when you're married 2 years, you're only 19 years old. My family was no longer living in the same city. It was a pretty hard go for both of us. And that next year, I had bounced back. I was now 6.5 months pregnant. It was 1976. A friend called in the middle of the night because he had been picked up by the police for drinking and driving and needed a lift home. We had a beautiful Mustang, and back in those days, the dimmer switches on cars were on the floor. And something had happened, the dimmer switch shorted out, so there were no lights. I had to drive this person home, and partway there, I was stopped by the police because I had no lights. It was a policeman at the main station that told me to drive that way because it was the only way the car would stay on. And when the policeman stalled the car, I got him to go get some booster cables to restart it. He didn't know how to use them, so I was in the middle of the highway. The car couldn't get off the highway because of the snowbanks. It was 2 o'clock or so in the morning. It was about 30 below Fahrenheit. There was no visibility on this corner. It was about 60 miles an hour was the speed limit there. And I asked him to set up flares before. He said it wouldn't take long enough. We were between the cars, and I was towards the left-hand lane of the highway because the car wasn't off, and he was on the side closest to the snowbank. He's 6 feet tall. I'm barely 5'2". The lights hit the curb as the car came around the curb in the highway, and he saw them and dove into the snowbank, and I was left to be crushed between the cars. And when the cars separated, I went up and over the hood and landed 2 lanes over on the highway, missing a good portion of my left leg. I was badly hurt, had a lot of abdominal injuries, fractured my skull lightly. I say lightly because it honestly felt, I had mentioned when we stopped that was Andrea's grave right there. And when I was flying through the air, it was like somebody put the hood up on this big wolf fur coat I was wearing. And it's the only reason my head didn't split like a melon, because it was so cold. And the cold was actually what saved me, because my femoral artery had been cut. Everything had been taken, one side of my femur and part of my knee, and the inside aspect of my thigh was all gone. It had been taken by the engine of my Mustang, which was now about 5 feet long. It was absolutely total. And they did not think I would make it to the hospital because I was just so broken. My left leg was up on my shoulder. My one arm was stuck in the middle of the air. Broke my legs about 16 places. I was pretty much a mess. I had to have a lot of plastic surgery and spent the next almost 5 months in the hospital. Got out for 3 weeks, was back for another month. Got out, and the next 5 years was spent in and out of the hospital. I lost both my kneecaps. I have no cartilage. And they just had to try and do what they could to kind of keep things going. And I'm a stubborn cuss. So I broke my nose about 4 or 5 times trying to learn to walk again because I wasn't going to just sit in a chair. And it took a while, but it didn't, there was no redeeming qualities about me back then. It made me really angry. I was angry at the policeman. I was angry at the whole situation. I was angry at the person who caused me to go out in the middle of the night. I was angry because my child died. I was just this ball of anger. And in all of that, I took on the mantle of victim. So for the next 10 years, I think I was pretty much the nastiest critter on the planet. I was not fun to live with, I can tell you that. And it was difficult for people around me because they felt for me because I was living in horrific pain. I had to keep having surgeries. But I learned much later that your attitude has an awful lot to do with just how much that pain can affect you. Because we are actually the captains of these ships, this human body that we have. And we weren't put here to just have pain and suffering and horrible stuff happen to us. And it took me a very long time to learn that. I went for surgery a number of years later when I was 27. So 7 years after the accident, I was so unhappy with who I was and how I looked. And I remarried. I had another child. And when he was about 3 months old, we were out for brunch with the family, and we were at this fancy restaurant that was really nice. And I went into the bathroom. And when I came out, I was washing my hands, and this woman came up behind me. And, I really was not happy. I had put on a lot of weight. I could no longer ski or skate or ride horses or do any of the things that I had done before. And this woman came up behind me and she said, "You have such a beautiful face. Why are you fat?" And I just had no answer. And I was so ashamed and devastated that this is what people saw, that I ended up investigating, getting my stomach stapled against the wishes of the whole family. Back in 1983, there were only, I think there might have been 4 doctors in all of Canada. The one here in Ottawa, unbeknownst to us, had already killed 2 people. When he got his hands on me, he was being investigated by the hospital that he worked for. We didn't know that either. In the surgery, the first surgery, we'll never know what actually happened because he made 3 OR reports and they're all totally different. And we didn't know back then why, but he sent me home, and I lasted at home for 17 hours that next week and had to go back to the hospital because I had nothing for pain. I was feeding through a tube in my side, which was supposed to be for a total of 3 weeks. And they didn't want you to have anything by mouth so that everything could heal, which was fine. I had set myself up. I had taken all the tests. I had wanted to go for this surgery. So there is no way on earth I would have done anything to impede it working well. It just wouldn't have made any sense. When I was finished in the emergency room, the doctor gave us a prescription for pills that my husband could put in the tube in my side because I couldn't have anything by mouth. He gave me a shot, and as he walked out of the cubicle in the emergency room, the resident that had been in the surgery came through the emergency room. And my husband said, the look on this man's face terrified him, and he didn't know why, but he knew something was very, very wrong. And this resident told the doctor who had just discharged me that I couldn't leave. It was now after 11 o'clock at night. And they called in the head of the X-ray department to do some special scan, which I knew nothing about. And just after midnight, they told us that I needed emergency surgery because I wasn't going to live to see dinner. Back in the 80s, they didn't really tell you a lot. Like doctors, you could ask questions and you basically get yelled at.
Yeah.
So we didn't know what was wrong. But the doctor kept saying, well, what did you eat or drink? Like, nothing. Why would that? That doesn't make any sense. You know, I have gone against my entire family here. Why would I do something that dumb? And it's my first experience with gaslighting, something I think Americans know a lot about. Anyway, that was the 21st of September. Within 2 days, what he had done, he went back in to supposedly fix things, but didn't really do anything and just closed me back up. What had happened was he had actually, in the first surgery, caused a gastric leak. And he covered it up. There's stuff in our bodies that's called omentum. And it's like kind of a mesh of glue. And so you can wrap, if you're working in organs, you can wrap them with this. It just gives you another layer of protection. But if the stitching or the staples or the whatever inside are not holding, then it basically becomes a pouch in which you can percolate infection and, in my case, peritonitis, and on the verge of sepsis. They ended up having to put in a chest tube because my left lung collapsed. 2 days after that, I don't know, I think I was on my 10th or 12th bag of blood. And the morning of September 28th, which was my daughter's birthday, they came and told me that I had to sign for surgery and I had to go now. And I just said, no, sorry, I'm done. You're not opening me again. And so he went to my husband and my father and told them that this just was not going, they had to go in, and fix things because I was dying. And they did go in. Again, we have no idea what he really did, but we do know that the thoracic surgeon that he brought in, that's a surgeon that deals with throat and I think lungs as well. Yeah. I died. My heart stopped. And when they got it restarted, then I stopped breathing. And so this thoracic surgeon came in and he diverted my esophagus out my neck. So I now had a hole in my neck. I had a tube in my side that I fed through. I had 4 tubes that went to drains that looked like little hand grenades. And I had a great big tube on my right side that went to a bag. I just called him Hugo because you go where I go. And he went with me for about 7.5 months. I was in ICU for 11 days because when I came to, I was open from my neck to my pelvis. They couldn't put me back together because all the tissue had become what they call friable. It was just one step before gangrene sets in. The tissue was coming apart and they could not suture it closed. So they packed me, and every day they tried to bring the sides together, I guess. And all that time, all 11 days, the hole in my neck was dripping on my skin. And I didn't know at the time, but saliva is like battery acid. It was eating my skin, and everything here was red and raw. And my poor mother, who could not even handle the sight of a drop of blood, had to come and sit in this room with me basically tented open under this weird sheet. So it was really hard on the whole family because they weren't getting any answers. And I was in no shape to say or do much of anything. When I finally made it to a ward, a couple of the nurses realized that my lips were so cracked because I had nothing by mouth at this point for almost a month, that they called in a stoma therapist. And a couple of days before they got to her, one of the nurses came in after visiting hours and after they'd sent everybody home. And she said, okay, if you say nothing, we are going to bring you a treat. Okay, what's that? And they all paraded in with all these towels. They picked up all the towels from the rest of the ward and they brought them and they put them all around my neck. And they brought me a freezy. And I got to eat the freezy. But sorry, this is gross, but the freezy came out my neck because there's a hole in my neck, right? And we graduated that next day to a popsicle. And then it was like, oh, give me them. So every day after everybody left, this is what happened. But in the morning, there was a giant pile of towels outside the room. Some were orange or blue, or, and the red and the blue ran together and it looked kind of purpley brown. And you could see that nobody understood, like, what the hell is on these towels? Well, the stoma therapist, when they brought her in, they do colostomies. So when people have to have a colostomy bag on their bowels, a stoma therapist comes and sets up and teaches them how to use it. So for me, she had a slightly different job because she taught me to put the colostomy bag on my neck. And at the end of the colostomy bag, there was a big clip. So that rather than all of this gunk going everywhere, it was caught in the bag and we could empty the bag into a K basin. So there was not this terrible mess every morning. And it was a little easier on my skin because the colostomy bags lasted for sometimes 2, sometimes 3, maybe 4 days. And I ended up keeping those colostomy bags for 7.5 months. I finally went home before Christmas. And I'll tell you, okay, not that I was going anywhere other than the bed. They had nurses come every day to look after me. But colostomy bags are an absolute bitch to accessorize. That clear plastic goes with nothing. Stop a beat. It was funny.
I'm there.
Please laugh. Go ahead.
I am laughing. Yeah. So, I guess you couldn't buy a purse or something to match it and put it in there or anything.
Oh my God. You couldn't even get a decent necklace to go with that thing.
Yeah. All right. Oh man. That's funny. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when everything around you is pain and horror, if you have a sense of humor, the best thing you can do is be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
And there was only one time that I didn't laugh at myself right away. I had been home for, probably about 6 or 7 months. And I was strong enough now to go out for a visit as long as someone picked me up and took me. And I was allowed to go for an hour to my friend's house. I was so excited because, first of all, there wasn't an awful lot of me left. I was very, very thin. And I was very excited about that. And I put on a lovely French vanilla cream dress. And unfortunately, it was raining a little. So I put a little raincoat over it. And we had a housekeeper like from the nursing service, and she helped me get dressed. And my friend's boyfriend at the time came over to pick me up in his little 2-seater Mercedes. It was beige, beige leather seats, beige everything. It was very nice. When we got to my friend's house, he helped me get out of the car. And I was so excited to get to her door that I didn't turn around. I didn't see him again until I knocked on the door. And when my friend opened the door, I opened my coat and went, ta-da! And she looked like she'd seen the devil. And I looked down, and my side, where the J-tube was, they were held in place by a little stopcock, and they fell out a lot. Well, it had fallen out in poor Ralph's car, and the bile had gone all over the dress, all over his leather of his new Mercedes. He was not amused. I wasn't amused at that moment because I was so embarrassed. But later, my girlfriend and I were both very amused because they're not together. But that ta-da now is a big joke with people. You don't ever want me to go ta-da because it's going to be awful.
All right, we won't let that happen. With everything you're sharing, I mean, you went through so much, right, to get to where you are today.
Yeah.
And there could be more, for, I guess, to this story that you're still working on, right?
Yeah.
But for now, with the stuff you're sharing, did you have the suicidal thoughts still along the way? I mean, you went through so much. So, I can't imagine if you said you had it way back as a kid that you wouldn't have it then.
And the weird thing is that I have such a bent sense of humor, and I guess such a will to survive, that those two pieces of me are always at loggerheads. There's the piece of me that just wants to make it easy and let's end this. And the other me is like, no, we haven't done everything. Like, you just can't do that. So it's like there's a constant battle going on, and an awful lot, like, being honest, there were a few funny moments in there, but an awful lot of that time, I was in so much agony. Yes, I just wanted to die over and over and over again, because the surgeries didn't end with those first 3. And the garbage didn't end because we spent 12 years in court. And not until the end of the court case did we find out that in that 3rd surgery, he was trying to cover his ass, and he took it all apart. So I had my stomach stapled, yes, for 3 weeks. But I can now say that there is no one on this planet who has tried harder to lose weight than me. Not only did I have my stomach stapled, they slit my throat.
Yeah.
And I laugh about it now, and I can, because in 2019, after I had done all the inner work, dealt with myself, okay, I put the victim away back in 1997. That's a story for another day. But understanding all that I've come to know and put together about self and how we can be in this world, it's a different person that sits before you. I am so not a victim. I am grabbing life with both hands. I love every moment that I am out there doing what I do. I get to speak to people all over the world. I've spoke in many, many places in the States and Ireland and virtually in Australia, New Zealand, Dubai, you name it. And if I can help one person find the humor or the hope so that they live one more day, then all of that will have been worth it.
Yeah.
Somebody
And you,
once asked, sorry,
yeah.
so somebody once asked me, like, oh my God, like, if you had your life to do over again, wouldn't you cut out all that? And in hindsight, no, because I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't have the empathy for people that I do. I wouldn't understand what the human body is capable of and what the human spirit can do.
Yeah, you had to go through all that. So now you can help those other people that are going through it and make it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Even you sharing your message and not knowing that you're going to touch one person is it's a big deal, right? Because you don't know where it's going to go. I'm sure it's going to
No,
hit somebody, right? But you don't know that. Somebody, that person might not call you up and say, "Hey, thank you.
oh
I
no,
appreciate."
no. And I'm not, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking for a thank you.
No,
I'm not
right,
looking for any of that. I
right.
will say this, okay? In 2021, September, the day that it was suicide prevention, I don't know how I found her other than I tend to fly by the seat of my pants now, and I'm always asking the universe, well, what do I do now? Where do I go next? And they put this woman in my path. Her name is Lisa Sugarman. She was an author who talked about parenting and different things. And that day, I found out that her father died when she was 10, but she found out when she was in her late 40s. He didn't die of a heart attack, he took his own life. So, in essence, her father died twice for her. And her mother had a really good reason for doing that. And it has turned out to be a wonderful thing. But since Lisa agreed to be on my podcast, she went back to school. She became a crisis counselor. She works with the Trevor Project for LGBTQ plus people in America. And she works with Samaritans as well. And she has changed her entire focus to work on suicide prevention. That is so cool. And the one thing that I wrestled with at first, because I thought, oh my God, I'm just not doing enough. Like, I'm not doing that. But I came to understand I am very empathetic and I don't have the capacity to separate myself from other people's stories. When they share their stories and they hurt, I hurt. It's who I am. So this is my gift, if you will, that I've taken from actually the gift Andrea gave me. Because best worst gift there is, by the way. But she gave me the gift of showing me what it was to be one left behind and showing me how I couldn't do that. My husband, children, my family. And that is invaluable because that's the reason I'm sitting here today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you made it through a whole bunch of stuff that you just share with us, and then some, like you said, other
Yeah, that's
stories
the
to
early
come.
years.
Yeah. Right. All right. So keep it a little secret for now, but yeah. No, I mean, so, so you have a podcast and you're having people come on and they're sharing, I'm assuming they're sharing their stories of suicidal thoughts or how they overcame them? You know, what are these guests doing?
Well, we've we actually are a little wider than that.
Okay.
It started with suicide loss, people who have lost family members, friends like me.
Mhm.
Uh, and it went on to, I met Frank King, who knows all about ideation. And I've had guests who talk about their anxiety, and guests who talk about depression, and guests who've talked about, horrific divorces and terrible breakups where one person was, everything was taken from them, everything from their finances to. So we have guests in all walks of life that have all kinds of problems they have to surmount. And it's the hope of, you know what? We can get past that. We just have to reach out to somebody. So for me, it got to be that bigger piece. Everybody has a story. And what is huge and horrific for one person may not be for somebody else, but it is in their life, in their story, and I'll honor that, whatever it is.
And that's why I see us complementing each other very well here, because the same thing goes for my podcast. You know, I've had so many different stories, trauma, whatever, you know, bankruptcy, whatever you name it, somebody's been through it, right? But it's getting those out there. So it does help that one person. So these people know that they're not alone. So yeah, I applaud you doing the same exact thing, you know, for longer than I've been doing it. So that, which is really cool. And we'll have to talk about that more offline. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, listen, I don't know, and we're running out of time, but how can people connect with you, whether it's through the podcast or through like some kind of service you have? You know, what's the best way for them?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find online, which is a good thing, seeing as that's what I do for a living.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. If you just look up Elaine Lindsay, I guarantee you'll find me. I'm also at truelsocial.com. I'll give you those links.
Hmm.
ElaineLindsay.com is my website. SZF42.com is the podcast. But if you type in suicide Zen forgiveness, you'll find the podcast everywhere.
Great. And I know you shared a whole bunch, but my question for you at the end is, what are three key things you've learned and used along your journey?
That's good. It's really good. What have I learned? I have learned that if you are grateful for even one little thing, your eyes open, and there are so many other things around you to be grateful for. You start with one, I guarantee you, every day you will find more things to be grateful for. Some big, some small, some maybe a little funny, but they're good. What else I learned? I learned that, well, very specifically, that policeman didn't leave me there on purpose. Our lizard brain is there to keep us surviving no matter what. And I put my 12-year-old granddaughter in front of me in a zombie horror house to keep her between myself and a butcher. It's a whole other story. But in doing that and being aghast at myself, I realized that policeman did not leave me there to die. He did not have a choice. Very few people have the gene that allows you to be incredibly brave in horrible situations. Most of us don't. And the third thing, what you surround yourself and what you think about expands. And to me, that makes it real simple. Just think the good stuff. Surround yourself with good people. Think about good things and be oh so grateful for everything that you have. And the rest takes care of itself.
That's right. Well, just to add on to that, I'm grateful and I appreciate you coming on, yeah, and sharing your story, your journey, because it's not over yet. So,
Yeah.
good, bad, whatever you want to call it from here on out. But no, I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, John. I appreciate it. And can I say to you and your audience, make the
Sure.
very best of your today, every day.
Yes. Great. Thanks.